Well, welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Schad. I write for FanSided and Zone Coverage. Our guest this week, see him on the right-hand side of the screen. He is Tom Schreier of ZoneCoverage.com. We do this every Tuesday and Friday morning right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. So however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. On today's show, Kevin O'Connell has resorted to a paint-by-numbers offense for J.J. McCarthy. Someone's probably got to get fired for this, and I guess the Commanders are coming to town, so we'll talk about that too. But let's not beat around the bush, Tom, because this is all everybody wants to talk about right now. Who will be the Vikings quarterback in 2026?
Well, I think it'll be a competition between Mac Jones and J.J. McCarthy. I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, this is not what they wanted, obviously. They designated J.J. McCarthy as a starter for this year, right? And that's kind of the fatal mistake, right, that this team made. I think you had written that O'Connell wants to be like going from the fun uncle to like, hey, he's a father now, right? This is the drafted child. I think they said they wanted to operate with clean hands, right? Have that offensive line set, have all these weapons. I think, to be honest with you, I think O'Connell said, like, I'll create a floor for him. Kwesi, you're gonna have more cap space. Go get the Hargrave, go get the Allen, go, bring Murphy back. All these different things on the defensive side, and then obviously fill out the middle of the offensive line after it fell apart with LA. So best laid plans, right? You know what I mean? Like sometimes it doesn't work out exactly like you think. I think going back, obviously you would have just had Darnold on the franchise tag. I think you wrote about this, and then had him compete with McCarthy. That not only gives you kind of some sort of threshold, right? It's like McCarthy goes down, Darnold steps in, or vice versa. Darnold beats him out. You have McCarthy kind of incubating. And I just think there was some fault in having so much pressure. It's, they asked so much of a 22-year-old quarterback who did not throw a lot of passes. I know he won a national championship with Michigan, but did not throw a ton of passes and just was not ready for kind of like a contending team, no matter what the environment was with the Vikings.
I've been looking at a short list of options. I can't even spit it out. I'm just like, because I think everybody's just shell-shocked right now. I know nobody expected this team to have 4 wins before December started. And, at this point, it's just, okay, what's going to happen now? Because we've seen this several times in Vikings history where a regime has a plan, it falls apart. Mm-hmm. You think of the 2008, 2009 Vikings where Tavares Jackson doesn't work out. They're turning to Brett Favre the very next year, and they go to the NFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. I'm not entirely sure that this roster is built to win now as people talk about it, but there's a list of intriguing options here, and I kind of wrote it down. I think the number one outcome, and I still think this is what Vikings fans should want, you should want J.J. McCarthy to succeed because you invested a top 10 pick in him. There's nowhere to go but up right now. I mean, these 5 games, it sounds like all the pressure is off. Kevin O'Connell sitting out there talking about, all right, it's all about decision-making now. Go ahead. I'm going to light this cigarette and go stick your finger in the light socket if you want to. Like, it just seems like very weird vibes. But, I mean, if J.J. McCarthy shows something in these 5 games, you're sitting there going like, okay, maybe we don't need a starter, but we just need a house of cards for him to topple next year.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I think the fault is beyond just handing the ball off at Michigan and him being so young is that, when I looked at Kirk Cousins, like, he had good footwork. He always dropped. I mean, if you talk to, like, let's say Jaron Hall or whatever, these backup quarterbacks who are learning under him, like, they're like, honestly, I was like, how does he never, like, hit his hand on someone's helmet, kind of like what McCarthy did? Or how does he, like, you know what I mean? How did he kind of learn this offense so quick, even as a veteran quarterback? And it just, like, it was simple instruction. Hey, drop to 5, drop to 7, whatever it is, and like go through the reads. What O'Connell needed to do is teach him kind of the language, and then, obviously a complex offense that's hard for anyone, even a veteran like Cousins. And then it was really like stay on that first read, which is code for like, hey, that's the deepest guy, that's the explosive Kirk, for God's sake, throw a 50-50 ball to Justin Jefferson or you know what I mean? Like kind of challenge the corner, just don't throw into double teams. And Cousins actually had the intellect and kind of the physical side of it. It really was just this, like, he is, and it's granted a guy who came in as like a backup quarterback in the league, right? And elevated to a starter or whatever, but I should say drafted to be a backup, but like he, he just did not, he wanted to take the check down, right? He wanted to throw underneath. Like that just is hardwired into his head. And like with Darnold was the opposite. Darnold was like, hey, I'll fling it, right? He trusted his arm. He had a lot of arm strength. Cousins was accurate, but Darnold could really drop a ball into the bucket like 30 yards down the field. And I think it was more his footwork was messed up. Like the Jets rushed him into action. That team wasn't very good. Carolina didn't help him. I mean, we've been through all this. Shanahan kind of purified him, I think, right? As a backup, I think he only had one start in a meaningless game. Like, but learned a complex McVay offense through him. And then O'Connell just built on that foundation. And now the Seahawks have built on that. We should mention, like, he has improved with the Seahawks. That is a steal. That is like a 1.5-year deal. 100 million is a nice amount of money, but like if you look at the guaranteed, right, it was really a 1.5. They weren't 100% sold on him, I think, and he has panned out. I think he'll be their franchise quarterback. I think the issue with McCarthy is that they're trying to do two things at once. They were trying to fix his mechanics. You see the leg whip, that just means he's throwing with his upper body. I think that's a result of him just being injured and not having the practice time to work on his mechanics. And then the second thing is just learning the offense. I think he throws so damn hard, like on every throw. It's, I mean, like, I know you've played Madden, I've played Madden. Like, that is how I play Madden. That's why I suck. Like, I just go, hit like hold down the A button. I think it's just he's not anticipating breaks. You think of like Aaron Rodgers, right? In his prime, he used his legs to kind of set up a pass, and then he threw guys open, right? It was like he knew where the break was. He knew when the guy was open. He even was just looking at leverage rather than like fully a guy like breaking away from the defender. And he goes, hey, if I throw it towards the sideline, the guy's breaking there. Obviously we saw his frustration and still, I guess, see his frustration with receivers. But if these guys do what they're supposed to do, the Cobbs, the Nelsons, the whatevers, they break in the right direction. The ball is there kind of as they're getting out of the break and looking for it, and he can throw a touch pass. And I think, that's just McCarthy has too much going on. And I think what O'Connell is saying is two things, and they're pretty tough. One is, I don't know if I can fix his mechanics right now. The season's lost. Like, I just need him to be throwing in the right direction. Because honestly, if you throw it near Justin Jefferson, he'll catch it. At least he has in the past, right? Addison tends to create separation. Hawkinson, maybe not the receiver he once was because I think the Kirby Joseph injury, but if you throw it near him, he'll body a guy up and catch it, right? And so I think he's taking the mechanics side out, going, hey, this is going to look weird, and we're going to have to work on this in the offseason. Make good decisions. Having said that, what's the underlying message? Hey, if you don't make good decisions, if you don't know how this offense works, there may be another starter next year.
And if that's the case, the options aren't a whole heck of a lot of fun. Aaron Rodgers, who looks like he's going to rob Kevin McAllister's house right now. You got the Daniel Stern look going, kind of. I don't know if you're gonna better be careful. Don't try and rob any 8-year-olds or however old Macaulay Culkin was, but.
Yeah, I mean, man, like, here's the thing. We I don't know if you know Justin Bailey, the producer for Size Shows and diehard Steelers fan, also like looks like Shane Gillis and probably as unhinged as he is. Like, he hates Rodgers. It's different. I think when you watch him all the time, you could just look at his stats and go, hey, he looks fine. And certainly what they're doing is different, right? Aaron Rodgers in his prime, I was saying, uses his legs to kind of, instead of like getting out and taking a hit, right? It was just like, give me an extra second, a guy will get open, I'll know where he is. It's funny. It was actually kind of like Carson Wentz, except Carson Wentz would use his legs to create a little extra time, and then just have no idea where any receiver ever was. But like at his best, like Rodgers did that at a high level, right? And now it's more. He looks at the line. Think of that game in it was against Pittsburgh in Dublin. He just looks at the line and goes, Metcalf's going to be open. This guy's going to be open. Dump it off the Gainwell, whatever it is. And I think, that is what you can. I think that like Peyton Manning late in his career, right, would just kind of like scan the field. He couldn't really use his athleticism, didn't have much arm strength. I understand why that could work for O'Connell. I don't think that's what he wants. I mean, I know, like, to use a better example, like they obviously can't go get Bo Nix, but like people are so mad that like they took McCarthy over Nix. I'm like, dude, Nix is not what O'Connell wants. Like, O'Connell does not want a guy who like is kind of late stage Drew Brees, except he's in his prime. You know what I mean? Like that's that. Peyton can coach a guy like that. Like, you can operate an offense. Granted, they almost lost to Washington, right? And that's Mariota's Washington. That's a team that's coming in here that the Vikings are favored against at US Bank Stadium this week. So, I think there's some limitations to that. Like, I think what he wanted with McCarthy is Darnold did have trouble with in-breaking routes over the middle. That is what McCarthy actually does well. I think he probably felt he was good enough throwing deep, and that he just loved this moxie, that he saw Darnold, and we saw it a little bit against the Vikings. We would be talking so much more about this defensive performance, that Turner looked like he turned it on, that Grenard was always in the backfield, Eric Wilson was always in the backfield, and Darnold didn't straight up freak out. Now, granted, it'd be hard to freak out in a game where the other team doesn't score, but like, he looked out of sorts. I mean, he was not getting into his weapons, and you look at the extreme LA this year where he throws 4 picks, like, I was reading a Mike Sando piece on this. There are coaches and GMs saying, like, dude, that is a freak out. And I think what O'Connell wanted, and I don't know if he'll get there, is like, he sees this pathway to, like, here's a player has that moxie in Chicago, had that moxie in Detroit. I mean, to be honest with you, after the Detroit performance, I'm like, I think McCarthy's fine. Not going to be great. I think you can win with that guy, right? And he obviously is not built on that, right? As soon as he fixes one thing, something else breaks. Like, he learns to throw within the huddle, and then he can't, like, they have trouble in Minnesota, right, with false start penalties, I assume because of his cadence or somehow how he's managing kind of the offensive line in the huddle and stuff. He fixes that, like, all of a sudden he starts, like, throwing inaccurately. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's like whack-a-mole, where it's like, here, I got this fixed, and then the gopher pops up or whatever. Like, or I guess it's a mole. Like, the mole pops up. Like, I think that's, that is the hardest thing with him. And I think in some ways, like, I guess, O'Connell's going, don't hit the mole that's over on the mechanic side, like, hit the mole that's over on the judgment side. And, who knows? I don't know if they'll ever be able to bridge this gap, or even if, like, McCarthy will be good on the Vikings timeline. But you can see kind of what the kernel of the idea was, like, get a guy with moxie and who's a winner and all this stuff, and then I'll build him into, like, a full-fledged quarterback.
And kind of going back and forth, but when we talk about simplifying the offense, and Kevin O'Connell talking about, I'm just going to let him play at this point because all the footwork stuff, we can work on that during the off season. There's a steady base, almost like he had an intervention, like I was talking about on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kevin, we still love you. Like, we're not going to fire you. Just run the ball a little bit more. Like, do some more simple stuff. Because, like you said, when watching him, there are times where he makes a really good throw. I think about the Jalen Nailor throw against Baltimore, where I was
Mm-hmm.
where I was kind of like, wow, that's a dime. There are some other throws. I think he had one against Green Bay where he kind of layered it into Justin Jefferson at one point. That was another good throw. But I mean, just having him go out there and just do what you can. Do your best for 5 games. Show us what you got. And like I said, and this is a big stretch for JJ McCarthy as well. You got the Commanders, who are bad defense. You got the Cowboys. I know, we're in who gonna stop them mode again. But their defense can be torched. They still don't have a secondary. And then you get who else? The Giants, who I don't know. They're going off bro power with Jackson Dart and Cam Scatabo on the sideline. But
yeah,
I think those are 3 teams that McCarthy can torch a little bit.
as
Torch. I don't want to say torch. Just
has
perform
success.
well. Yes.
Yeah, I'll get to the actual football analysis, but Cam Scatabo, you know this better than me, right? Injured player. Is that WWE, right? Just like physically engaging with other human men.
He was sitting ringside.
Yeah.
And they had Dom Mysterio, who is like their up and coming heel. He got the big lucha mask tattoo on his neck and everything else. And he came up and started talking to Cam Scatabo. And it's funny too, because Jackie Redmond's like a reporter for WWE,
He also
but
does
she also
hockey.
does NHL.
Yeah.
It's like super credible, and like she's just in the middle of it. So yeah, Dom went over there and started talking his shit, and Scatabo and Abdul Carter started taking swings. And I mean, it was all scripted, of course, but you're coming off a dislocated ankle, and like, that dude is just weird. He's like, putting on a helmet and like slamming his head against walls and like chugging energy drinks out of his shoe and everything else.
Well, Jackson Dart is very much like, Jackson Dart looks like someone cast to be a quarterback, right? Especially
Sunshine.
Yes, I mean, especially in New York, especially with that name. Dude, when he got blown up on the sideline there, that I mean, they looked like the NFL blitz. Like that just didn't look real, dude. You know what I mean? Like Madden doesn't have that kind of like action in it, but I think it, I mean, like I said, at some point, I guess that's maybe something you can build off of. I assume it's someone else in New York, not Joe Shane, but like, but yeah, I mean, if you look at those teams, I mean, here's my argument. Listen, and this is my bad. I booked Seattle. Like they beat Detroit. I go, tough stretch coming up here, right? You look at Baltimore, Chicago, Green Bay. I'd contend this. Like, if you can pick up 2 wins there, you actually had this breathing room with Washington, Dallas, New York. Now, obviously, they've lost. I think they lost control of the season against Baltimore. I think you can even look back at that like 3rd and 1 play, right? I understand what they were trying to do, 1-on-1, all this stuff. We don't need to relitigate, but like that's where you kind of lose control of the season. Obviously, Chicago looks like he pulls, McCarthy pulls off another kind of one drive wonder, I guess. And obviously special teams breakdown, all of a sudden criticism for Matt Daniels and that unit. And then, I mean, Green Bay, no chance, one of the worst games we've seen. And then gets even worse in Seattle. But it just, it is such a, it's such a missed opportunity in my mind. Cause like, I think if you pick up one of those wins and you look competent, maybe you're, like you feel like these games are more meaningful. Instead, it's more, I think the thing with O'Connell is that, and all these guys do this, like in McVay, like gets away from the run. People forget, like, now the Packers have played better, right? But the Packers had expectations with Micah Parsons that like this is a Super Bowl type defense. Like Jordan Love just has to do his job. People did not like the McVay coach there, right? And LaFleur has won more than he's lost by a large margin in Green Bay. Did not like Love, looked like an emerging star, the next franchise guy for them. Frustrated that it was just like a defense first team, which is what the Vikings are, right? You have Flores, you have the Flores defense. There's talent there. They've stayed pretty healthy considering like that is a veteran unit. Maybe Hargrave's slowing down, like Harrison Smith isn't what he once was, all this stuff, but like certainly you look at the cornerback room and you're like, I feel like this is always the case with the Vikings since maybe like Xavier Rhodes left, right? But like you always look and go, hey, you wish there was a little more, but that is a talented defense. Turner coming into his own and stuff like that. So it's weird. Like for a minute there, I don't think Packers fans think like this anymore, but they were basically like Vikings fans, right? Kind of had the same gripes. And so I think the difference here is, I suppose they're not mathematically limited. I believe they kind of are though, right? They're not, it's less than a 1% chance to make the playoffs. I think O'Connell may run more. I think the thing he knows and the thing he can't get away from is that like, what separates him is these long developing concepts, these explosives, these things that just break defenses, right? And it's defenses know that, and the best teams. I mean, I look at now, granted, against an easier schedule, right? But like last year, I mean, they probably would have lost more games if they weren't playing the Jacksonvilles, the Indianapolises. I'm trying to think of who was in like the middle, kind of Kirk Cousins with the Falcons, right? Like, I think I guess Darnold came alive against the Falcons, but I'm trying to remember that 3rd game. But like they're playing these like really bad teams, and the beginning of that schedule wasn't as tough. The Houstons and stuff were not as tough as maybe they kind of thought. But I think the best teams, right? Like if you look at it, it was a weird year last year, right? They literally just, Detroit comes in, here's the blueprint, right? Attack up the middle, use dagger concepts, max protect. LA did it a little differently. I think that was more outbreaking routes, kind of deep towards the sidelines, throws that Stafford can make and other quarterbacks maybe have a little more trouble with. Also, they had good receivers, right? But, they kind of found a niche that kind of worked against the Vikings defense. And then obviously the pressure up the middle. And I think what they found is even with these long developing concepts that break defenses, like it doesn't matter if you can create pressure, throw Donald or any quarterback off. And so, that I think because the season's lost, and this is, someone was saying, I think it was like Luke Braun was saying, like, this is the first season since like 1984, like truly, where like you enter December without any hope, where it's, you feel like you're the Browns or the, whatever, the Jets or whatever. And like, he may just run more because like, that's not he doesn't have to lean into his superpower, right? It's more like McCarthy needs to be viable. Like the difference here is not just like, hey, a miscalculation, a catastrophic miscalculation that JJ McCarthy was not ready, that like you should not have just treated it like, hey, you have the rookie contract because the player on the rookie contract wasn't ready, right? The core mistake we'll look back at in hindsight's 2020 is you should have just franchise tagged Darnold. What you have to do then, though, is
You
accept
got to
that
be careful with that. You'll get thrown into Twitter jail, but go on.
I think in more seriousness, it's listen, these are two guys who lean too far into their strengths. As much as the Dobbs thing is good, remember Dobbs had 2 good games, right? It really was like eventually Chicago, I think this is maybe 4 games in, but figured out like just don't let him run outside the pocket. He can't like beat you with his arm, right? It's still ridiculous to me that like they won in Atlanta beyond everything, just like the fact that how did you not like create a game plan on the fly to beat him, right? But either way, like that's him leaning into the quarterback too much and Kwesi leaning too much into just throwing a team together in free agency. But the other issue you'd have with Darnold is not the 40 million. That to me matters less. It's more if he succeeds, you're in the Sam Darnold business. And that's the one thing like Seattle is a little bit saved from. I mean, at some point, maybe his agent, as the guaranteed money dries up, goes, hey man, my guy's still in the prime. Like it's not probably a long-term deal, but like, let's get a substantial deal here. Right. And that is a different calculus. And that is the problem is you open up a second pathway they didn't want. What I think O'Connell wanted was this idealistic pathway of like, get McCarthy ready. Right. He's going to grow. He's going to develop. And as soon as like like you have to pay him a lot of money, we're going to shift from like a defense first team to a McCarthy first team, which by the way seems insane right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that is drastically different. And I think that fault will kind of, that is the fault that ultimately kind of tanked the season. The other thing is there just is no bottom. Like what I kind of described it as quarterback hell. Like it's not just Brosmer was really bad. By the way, just the UDFA, right, is not going to be like, we joked about this. I obviously know your opinions on this. Anyone who follows on Twitter knows what you think, but like, he's not Purple Purdy, right? But beyond all that, like he is not like, he's not even like Carson Wentz. You know what I mean? He's not even just like Joe Flacco, like a guy who just kind of gives you some stability. Like he is the line between him and John Wolford, right? You know what I mean? Like and like this, just the whole quarterback position is cratered in like a catastrophic way because it just was not, it was set up just for McCarthy. Like you could have brought in Flacco to compete with him. And if Flacco loses the competition, at least Joe Flacco is your backup, right? I think Rodgers is different. I think the issue with him is more a obviously declining player, B, what you've written about, a chemistry issue. Like he's going to make it all about Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is also never going to cede ground. Like it wouldn't be like, let's say he's on the Pittsburgh path and we start to see faults in his game. Maybe they start him against Green Bay and Seattle because of those are in Green Bay and Seattle. Those are really tough places to play. But this is actually where you'd reinsert McCarthy. You're essentially taking the blueprint I think you had created for last year, right? Was, hey, put in McCarthy when you're playing the Jacksonvilles, when you're playing the Indianapolis and stuff like that. Tennessee, I think, was after that. When you're playing those bad teams, like that's when you put them in. This is actually kind of where you'd insert them. And I still think as much as it's different, this is no longer salvage the season, but this is a beatable Washington team. I guess it is very different if it's Jaden Daniels. Like obviously I think the line would move. It's already moved, I think, through 0, right? I think it was like Washington favored, then Minnesota favored. And I think Minnesota is now favored by 2.5. But
2.5, yeah.
But I think it was Washington 1.5, wasn't it? And I think it moved through 0. And so like, who knows, maybe it swings back with Daniels. Also, Mariota never became the player we kind of thought he might be, but like certainly a star in college, but he is still a viable starter. You know what I mean? But either way, like that's a winnable game. The Dallas one is really weird. The Dallas one to me feels like a potential McCarthy game. And why I say that is like, it's the opposite with Kirk Cousins. We always said like, hey, if it's noon against some random team, like you're seeing numbers. Like that's where he bulks up and gets like numbers that get him paid, right? And we see, by the way, Kirk Cousins could look at this right now and go, this is why I get paid, because I am kind of the barrier between like, yeah, probably not going to drive winning for you. He just moves to the level of, it's Joe Flacco, honestly, in his prime. It's Trent Dilfer. Like he moves to the level of the team, but he keeps you from just completely imploding, even though Cousins can have imploding games, right? You know what I mean? He's such a funny player, right? But like, he pad his stats at noon, and then at 7:20 in Dallas, we'd see issues. And I think this might be the opposite for McCarthy. Now, Dallas has something improved. They're starting to win. That doesn't look as easy, but it does feel like if he could win in Chicago and win in Detroit, why can't he win in Dallas? And then it's, and then it's the Giants where I think Jackson Dart's fun. Like I said, it feels like central casting. Dude, I mean, he's going to have to be like an adult at some point and slide. But like right now, this crazy dude who just does like no disregard for, what I mean? For anything, like fun player. Having said that, very beatable team. And then you're going to have trouble. Like Detroit's going to need that game here. Green Bay probably will need that game here. I think Chicago's a paper tiger, but I think Green Bay wants any chance they can have to host stuff at Lambeau in the playoffs and stuff like that. So you know what I mean? It's like you got tough games coming up, but I think these are winnable. The problem is the Vikings are now the team everyone looks at and goes, that's our winnable game. You know what I mean? And so like that is the dynamic they'll have to overcome. And it's definitely changed. It's gone from just win these games to really it is just about McCarthy.
Looking at the rest of the list, we won't go through all this because we got plenty of time to do this. I mean, Adam and I have joked that Aaron Rodgers is probably the leader of the clubhouse because everybody would go, our jobs are on the line, and they'll hire a 43-year-old. Like wrestling fans would call this lazy booking, right? Brett Favre did it, so might as well sign Aaron Rodgers, even though he's 3 years older and all this stuff. He looks awful. He looks old. He's hinting receivers aren't showing up to meetings, pointing the blame everywhere else. Good luck with that, Adam Thielen. I had Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyler Murray on this list.
Oh boy.
Like I said, I'd just rather have JJ pan out. And, the Justin Jefferson talk, that's been a thing this week too. We can get into that a little bit later as well. Down the line,
let's point this out though. Those are very like the quarterbacks I'm saying are very different situations. Joe Flacco is the buffer. Like, by the way, Joe Flacco is going to be like 41 or something. He may just hit a wall. I mean, it's weird that like sometimes these guys who aren't great, their games actually translate well because like it wasn't predicated on like raw athleticism, arm strength. It's Joe Flacco kind of got by like being smart with the ball, and when he threw interceptions, it was deep down the field, right? I mean, I'm oversimplifying that, but I think that's why it worked on a defense first team with Baltimore and why he's stuck there for a while, and then obviously he's stuck around the league. I'll be honest, longer than I thought. That is more if McCarthy loses a camp battle to him, that's a problem. Mac Jones, the problem is you're banking on like another Darnold working out, right? I mean, the thing we have to remember with Darnold is I think he was like third overall, and he was projected to be Andrew Luck. That's Lance Zierlein. This is not like some random kid. Like this is a guy who knows what he's talking about, has talked to scouts and stuff like that. Like Darnold had raw ability, and it's just the fault of the NFL or any league that the worst teams, the worst run teams typically are the ones that are getting the best players. And so even with the threshold where he sometimes freaks out, like, listen, ultimately Darnold is super talented, generally calm, like all this stuff, right? Mac Jones is 15th overall pick. I actually see him as more like a Cousins type, right? I don't think he has like the upside of a Darnold to even kind of maximize fixed, however you want to see it. Having said that, I think they're gonna be tempted, and the problem is then you get in the Mac Jones business. Then it's if he wins that camp battle, I'd have to look at his contract. I assume it's expiring next year, right? And then like you'd have to pay him after that, but like it's either McCarthy beats him in the camp battle, he's the safeguard against another McCarthy injury, against poor play, all that stuff. Or it's Mac Jones wins the camp battle, and then you're in the Mac Jones business, and that's very different than what they planned, but that is probably your like upside. The guy you didn't mention is like an Anthony Richardson. You had joked about this, if he's going to show up like foaming at the mouth, and O'Connell's going to be waving a playbook at him. Like, listen, that's a weird one with the Colts. And I just wonder if these offensive geniuses, this is Shanahan with Purdy, not with Trey Lance. This is, you go back to McVay, he inherited Goff, but like he moved off Goff and went and got a Stafford. Like Steichen, I think, is a pretty smart coach. They could not figure out Anthony Richardson. Now, maybe that's an Anthony Richardson issue, but if it's not, and we know this, I don't think they're going to go get him, but O'Connell loves him. O'Connell was probably pushing to have Kwesi trade up for him. Like we saw those reports. You see him like hugging him, be like, you're a bad man, right? All that stuff. Like, dude, that is coming from a place of like, O'Connell's he knew Will Levis was, I guess, spoiled mayo, if you want to use that. You know what I mean? He knew he's no good. The quarterback killer. You know what I mean? Like he slice and dice them up. He's like, we're not drafting him. And like, he is picky about his guys. So I think Richardson, the hard thing is you're probably playing upside there, but like, why have two projects working at once? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't think it's something they're going to do. Kyler Murray to me is more, I understand his age and what he's done in the league, and like O'Connell values just experience, right? I think it's why he got a Desmond Ridder. I think it's why he got like a Howell and stuff like that. Like, I think he just, even like a Mullins probably, like he just is like, hey, there's nothing, as much as Brosmer was bad, he benefited in some ways from playing an NFL game and going through something that you just can't practice. And so, the problem with Kyler Murray is I think I assume Mike McDaniel gets fired here again, another McVay guy, another kind of mixed results, but he was creative with Tua. I mean, they messed up, and this is not McDaniel, this is the Dolphins, messed up the whole concussion issue, right? And like, you had a player who it was profoundly dangerous for him to be out and getting hit. And like, I think Tua ultimately was more limited than we thought he was coming out of college. He created an offense around him. This is not what the Vikings should do, but I think if your team rebooting a little bit, but don't want to fully rebuild, like, you could hire a defensive coach and set kind of a baseline, right? Like, if our defense is this good, we'll hover around 500, essentially kind of the Pittsburgh model. And then you have to have the defensive guy trust, like McDaniel could manage Kyler Murray better. I think he could run the Tua offense, right? I think there's probably a tough conversation there being like, you have to protect the ball. This team expects to win. If they didn't, they just tank and get their own guy. But using his speed, using kind of these like 2 seconds, you'd probably have to go get a dynamic receiver. It's going to be tough. But it's like, I could see them running that. That just, to me, is not the Vikings. And I think that's actually more limited than what Kevin O'Connell would want. And so it is, I mean, the hard thing is like, they've painted themselves in the McCarthy corner. Like, it is every other option is inferior to like a McCarthy second year surge, right? Whatever the opposite of like a sophomore slump is, right? But the reason why I think it's Mac Jones is ownership is always paid. I mean, listen, ownership shelled out like $300 million. That's not just for this year. That was into next year. That was like, we extended you guys. Here's your plan, right? Now that you've kind of proven yourself, I guess 27 wins in the 2 years we had good quarterback play, where Cousins wasn't hurt, I guess. Like, I think they're willing to shell out. I think it sounds weird. I think O'Connell trusts Shanahan, right? And like, I think if he can maximize Cousins, he can maximize Mac Jones. The hard thing for me is I was always a little skeptical of McCarthy because of, like, I knew he had won. By the way, you talked to him, like, he's an awesome dude, but like, it really was just like, there were so many missing elements that I was like, I'm going to have to see a few more of these before like I really buy in. The problem is you're not getting that McCarthy upside, because he is probably going to be the weirdest start to a career ever. Started really young, like utmost belief he's the only player I think in the first round pick since the modern draft that like had missed a whole year because of injury, right? So like, there's all these unprecedented things, but usually these guys succeed in like low leverage situations, right? It's kind of the games no one's watching but the diehard fans. And in this, like, it's in Chicago. Like, people forget when Chicago is good, that's loud. That's like a sports town. Those teams do not serve that town very well, right? But like, they are loud. They believe in that team. I always tell my friends who are from Chicago, that is the 2022 Vikings. They will not hear it. They will see it in the playoffs. But now, granted, I will point out the Vikings should have won a playoff game, right? They should have beaten the Giants. But like, when they run into an actual juggernaut, they're gonna have some trouble. But like, that's a loud place to play. That's his hometown. There was some emotion around that first game, right? And then the Detroit, like, I'm not going to downplay that, man. That was a 9-point underdog. I was flying out there being like, why am I going to this game? Again, you book out, in advance or whatever. But like, I was like, they're going to get killed. And like, I know it's not, Dan Campbell's lost his coordinators. They're maybe not quite the Detroit they once were. That's a really, really tough place to play. And I thought he played well enough, right? And you know what I mean? And I think we may see another moment. It's probably going to be against Dallas, right? I think they could beat Washington, just be clear. But I think it's going to be against Dallas. And I think it may be something where he has trouble in Jerry World with 100,000 people there. I assume there were still Vikings fans in Seattle. I assume if someone has a trip set for Dallas, especially with this weather, like, you're probably heading out there, right? Anyways, so like, you also have the pressure of like, there's people who are there who expect you to win in the stands and stuff like that. And I think he could have one more moment. And I think the issue is like, does he really beyond that, even if he plays well against Dallas, even if there's some momentum going, does he really have success? Like, Detroit's going to want to take this one here, right? Green Bay that's probably a meaningful game for them. But I think we're going to see those, and it's just a weird start to the career. He has moxie. It's real. He also just breaks down sometimes and just sometimes throws, I mean, it's not even an uncatchable ball. It's like you're in the third row of the sidelines and you're jumping for it, right? You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
like it's just like, you know what I'm saying though? It's just such a weird start to the career. You really expect these guys to have trouble when the pressure's on most. And he actually just has trouble just doing routine things, which is just means he started too early.
Well, no matter how you feel about JJ McCarthy, you can put your money where your mouth is over at Underdog Fantasy. Football season is in full swing, and Underdog is the best place to get in on the action. Playing Underdog is easy. You just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like rushing yards, receptions, touchdowns, and more. As Tom can vouch, because I talk about it a lot, I've been playing Underdog for years, and I'll tell you just how easy it is. Every Sunday, get up, have a cup of coffee, fire up the app, see what's on the board. You look at some of the picks that are available for Vikings and Commanders this week. There are a lot of players on the injury report, so it's kind of difficult, but maybe you're not sold on JJ McCarthy. You can go higher on 1.5 interceptions, get a little multiplier going there. Terry McLaurin, maybe you're not real confident in Marcus Mariota, whatever his name is. It doesn't matter. You go lower on Terry McLaurin at 50.5 receiving yards. If both are correct, you can win some money. You can play with as little as $1. Download the app today. Sign up with the promo code The Age, which is all one word. You score $100 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code The Age, all one word. Underdog. Make picks, win money. You must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/web/playing get terms _DFS_.html for details. Offer is not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. If you are concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. All right. With that out of the way, let's look ahead to Sunday. A much anticipated matchup between the 4-8 Minnesota Vikings and the 3-9 Commanders. As such, it will be played in the Kirk Cousins window, 12 noon on Sunday on Fox. Adam Amin, Drew Brees, and Christina Pink on the call. Vikings, as we mentioned before, 2.5-point favorites over at DraftKings Scorebook, an over-under of 42.5 points. I'm sure this game will be a real banger, but I don't know if I want them to win or lose, whatever. Outside of JJ McCarthy, because we've talked about him enough, what do you want to see from this team in the final 5 games?
I mean, I'm cheating here, but just like get Justin Jefferson back involved. Obviously, that ties back to quarterback play. I think what gets lost in all this, and I just don't think it should be this way, is that I think people recognize that Justin Jefferson has had some grace with this situation. Like, granted, he's in practice with him, as media, and I don't go up there maybe as much as I should. Like, you can see parts of practice. It's a bit of a give and take where it's like, obviously you can't be in parts where like you could tweet something out that would ruin the game plan. And like, that means also you're not seeing certain aspects. When Kevin O'Connell says Max Brosmer, the ball never hit the floor, like, we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I honestly, and with McCarthy, I mean, there's times you see him practice and you're like, looks like he throws to 3 levels and you know what I mean? All this stuff. The biggest example maybe is training camp, right? Like, think of that. I mean, it's not outdoors. It's not, I do think it's cool that like, isn't it like 10,000 people show up? It's like thousands of people show up to these, you know what I mean? The training camp that obviously doesn't matter, even if it's joint practices, like it's not an official game. It's not even really like a preseason game, but like, I think it's going to look something like that. And like, obviously Jefferson is telling us, O'Connell's telling us, I guess McCarthy in his own way is telling us like, yeah, he's fine when he's practicing and obviously Kevin O'Connell, I think as much as we made a lot of like McCarthy meeting with him, he also meets with Justin Jefferson, right? He knows he's a star. What I don't think we should get away from is like, it's rare, but this is a quarterback oriented team. You can make a claim it is a defense oriented team. The only pushback I have against that is like, hey, if Tomlin goes, like Brian Flores might be their, Pittsburgh's coach, right? You know what I mean? It's one of the rare destinations he could go to. Like that changes. If you talk to the players, and I've talked off the record, like try to have them be as honest as possible. They're like, yeah, dude, no one like comes in and is Brian Flores. Like Brian Flores is the product of being with the Patriots forever, working under Belichick, a scout, and then a coach, and a guy who he coached offense and defense. We look at his resume. So like he is just melding like all this information and it comes out and his coaches that like there's just very few people in the world truly like in the NFL that have that. So I think it's still a Justin Jefferson, based team. Like it's a receiver based team. And you have to, they cannot take that for granted. It can't be 2 catches for 4 yards. I understand Jefferson's had some weird drops and even goes back to Philadelphia when the season was still live. And like Cooper DeJean, I think, made a nice play on one of those, but like, and then I forget there was one like crossing over the middle where he's near the end zone. It's just, here's the thing. Like he's created this ridiculous standard, but like, the other thing is I wonder how catchable those balls are from McCarthy. I understand like guy like Brett Favre and John Elway would like heave balls in, but it's different. Like I think McCarthy is kind of behind the play, right? And he's trying to fit into these like they're not even windows. He's just trying to like kind of throw the ball almost like a dartboard, you know what I mean? Like kind of at the player. And like I just, again, he should reel some of these in. I also think like guys like even Kirk Cousins and Darnold threw more catchable balls, but we just can't lose sight of that. Like let's have a 100+ yard Justin Jefferson game. Like remind everyone this guy's still great. Say keep him happy, but just like do right by the guy. Like he's done right by the organization. I understand they spent a lot of money on him, but he's worth what that is. And the other thing is he's supposed to be the floor raiser for the quarterback. So absent that, I'd say more like could Addison do something right? He had a couple of bad catches. As much as he's not saving Brosmer there, he's not like helping him there that much. I mean, I'm just going through weapons, obviously, but the third one obviously is, and probably it's in this order, like a Hawkinson. And all these can happen, by the way. It's not exclusive. Like, he just forgot about TJ Hawkinson. This was actually Sam Darnold's biggest fault, man. Like, I get it. He's dealing with a lot of pressure and his footwork got all messed up and all this stuff. Detroit's a hard place to play. I'd contend Glendale was, it was just a neutral site. And also there was a lot of Vikings fans there, but like, dude, TJ Hawkinson was open. You could have looked for him. So I just think as much as maybe Hawkinson isn't the player he once was pre kind of the Kirby Joseph hit, right, which is not his fault, he's a safety blanket. So number one to me is Jefferson, but I would take anything else too along those lines. Kind of just a Addison comeback game where he shows he's sure-handed, right? Even just use Hawkinson more. And so, yeah, I mean, it's obviously stems back to McCarthy, but also it's just a reminder, like if this becomes a Mac Jones team or it becomes something else, it's Justin Jefferson's team. And it's just like the idea of the quarterback. And it's weird because the quarterback is so important in football. It's something that just we haven't seen in Minnesota. Obviously, you and I both, we remember like Randall Cunningham and like the Jeff George year and the, you know what I mean? Like beyond the Spurgeon wins and the, these random guys, right? Like they just always patch the quarterback situation together. And maybe the only time, if you think of Culpepper, I also wonder if you handled Brad Johnson differently, right? If like that maybe would have been more stability at the quarterback position, but everyone yearned for it so much that Kirk Cousins became desirable, right? Because he just could like handle the position. You weren't guessing who would be under center every Sunday or every year, right? And so regardless, even if the idealistic kind of JJ McCarthy kind of side doesn't pan out, like, man, Justin Jefferson, like blow up against Washington. For that matter, like do it in prime time in Dallas, do it against New York, right? And so I just, my whole thing is kind of like Justin Jefferson deserved this. He wants to be on a winning team. I think he probably cares about that more than stats, but also they can't win if he's 2 receptions, 4 yards.
And also, I did have it on my notes, but we're not going to dive too deep into it because a trade is kind of unrealistic at this point. I know he's been brooding lately and really, like you mentioned it.
Oh, trading Jefferson.
Yes. Trading Jefferson, just kind of holding off,
Yeah.
Everybody on TikTok's going to start the top 5 trade destination, Justin Jefferson. We going to play with Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes need a wide receiver. We going to get him one. $46.4 million in dead money this offseason if they trade him. So, yeah, but he has I was going to mention he has no guaranteed money after 2026. So the time bomb is probably next year when you're sitting there going,
here's the truth. The time bomb is for everybody, though. You know what I mean? It's
correct.
I understand this. There are people who are going to say, look at Kwesi, how he's drafted and how he messed up this free agency. He's basically patching over bad draft picks with like good free agency moves, right? And I'm counting UDFA, so undrafted free agents among them, right? Like an Ivan Pace, who was good for a little bit. Rosmer is what it is, but like, hey, you did get an undrafted guy who beat out 2 other guys, right, and stuff like that. And Jalen Redmond is a good example, not UDFA, but like a random guy who's really good. Like, I think I get the Quasey thing. Like, listen, these guys were just extended. I mean, I guess. I mean, listen, they can't have the Seattle game against like Washington, really Dallas. I know Dallas is playing better, or New York, right? But like, absent that, like these guys are going to retain their jobs. It is a patient, and it's the ownership group you want, which is makes this whole situation so frustrating. Like they're patient and spend. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you get one or the other, right? You have a team that spends. Now we could look at it and be like, hey, so when you went 0-3 in 2023, like you didn't want to just tank for Drake May. I get like you don't want to screw up the culture, but also you're 0-3, and Drake May is really good. But
1-4 nonetheless, too.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, like, again, Akers is what he is, but you go get Reisner Akers. Like, it was clear they were like, no, this is a fluke start to the season. We're going to win, whatever. I mean, hindsight's 2020 on that because you obviously wouldn't have known Jefferson has this non-contact injury. And then, Dobbs comes in and then nearly kills Jefferson and gets benched, right? So, like, there's a lot of bad that happened in that season, even with the Dobbs mania briefly. But I think, having said that, like this is the ownership group you want, dedicated to winning, patient, spends money. They're going to bring them back. This is O'Connell and Quasey for another year. The other thing is you probably salvage another year of Jefferson because what you do, I mean, unless he just is completely distraught, is you end up like O'Connell and Quasey are officially on the hot seat. They've gone from like cooled things down. I understand no one was happy about how the season ended, where you lose to the same 2 teams twice, and like how it looked in those final 2 games. I mean, it's crazy to think we went from that kind of iconic image of Darnold being raised up, which is so funny because I don't think Sam Darnold wants that. I think Sam Darnold, like, he's not Harrison Smith's a 1-on-1. Like Harrison Smith, I think, like, I joke that if he didn't play football, you'd hire him to kill people. Like, I actually think he'd probably be really good at it and very professional and all that stuff. Like, he's quiet. He'd get in and out, like, not leave a trace, right? But, like, Darnold is a little more of that. I probably mentioned this to you off the air, but like he came up to the media because he had been talking to ex-teammates in the Vikings locker room and just was like, hey, what's up? And you like kind of forget it's Sam Darnold. Like you're like, yeah, who's this? You know what I mean? Like he's just kind of a guy. And I think, you go from him who probably doesn't want to be raised up, you know what I mean? But his teammates are raising up, throwing water on him. O'Connell's sitting there in the background, kind of smiling, being like, hey, look at the culture I made. I turned Sam Darnold into the superstar. And like, it goes from that almost immediately to, oh my God, the Demons are back. They can't beat Detroit. Think of how hyped that game was too. Like 2 14-win teams, division rivals, all this stuff. Like, you go that and then really like the LA, they were favored. Like, you know what I mean? They were favored against New York a couple of years ago. The Dayball Giants, right? 2.5. Same thing with LA. I think people recognize like there's gonna be Vikings fans there. This is not in LA. That's a win. And that game unspooled almost immediately, right? Even with all that, I think they had cooled off their hot seats, right? It was like there was some credit for the Dobbs thing. There was the culture works. It's look at what he did with Darnold. Look at what he did with Dobbs. What could he do with his own quarterback? And this is the NFL. It's immediately hot. I think the difference is instead of kind of giving into that, I think what the Wilfs will say, I assume, and we'll see what they say. But like, I think Mark Wilf will come out and say, "Hey, this is a disappointing season. This is not to the Vikings standard." I don't think he'll get into how bad it is. Like we're talking like Joe Webb playoff type performances. We're talking about like one of the first Decembers in forever that this team is irrelevant and stuff like that. Like, but I think he'll say like, listen, they have to fix this next year. And if they don't, I think you just buy an extra year with Jefferson saying, hey, we're bringing in another group. Now, I don't know what that is. Typically you go from like offensive coach, player friendly to like hardo defensive coach. I don't think that's what Justin Jefferson wants. I think he remembers not talking to Mike Zimmer. I think he remembers Mike Zimmer saying, hey, him being like, hey, you know what? We're playing this meaningful game. I think it was against Chicago to end the season where you probably should lose to get the draft position. Could you just throw me the ball a ton so that I can break a record? And Mike Zimmer was like, nope, we're winning this game. You know what I mean? Like he didn't have to do much to get him that record. I don't think he wants to go to that, right? I don't think he wants to. I mean, people have talked to you just transition to Flores. Like, I think Flores has changed and grown. Like, you know what I mean? I'm a huge Flores fan. I think it's actually how I feel about McDaniel on the offensive side. I think like McDaniel is like, I would love to have him as the offensive coordinator. I don't know if I trust him as a coach. Flores for very different reasons. Like, I think he may go to Pittsburgh. He will get a primo job. I don't think he'll leave Minnesota for anything but like one of the best jobs. But like, he may go somewhere and like maybe Tua's just a pain, right? Or maybe it's just like he gets along with a different kind of quarterback. And also, I just think he has evolved. Like, I think of when he first showed up here, and obviously this is very inside media, but hey, I would tell anyone, watch the coordinator press conferences. Those guys are very forthcoming. These are Wes Phillips, third generation coach. This is Matt Daniels. I understand under fire. I understand why people are upset with him. I actually think at least a dynamic coach who, by the way, has found a kicker who looks, knocking on wood, reliable, and a punter who's improved, right? And has developed guys like Metellus and developed guys from the special teams, right, into kind of the offense and defense. He's great. Flores, if you go back and watch, he was so guarded, right? It was this Tua came out, I think it was on the Lebitard show, being like, this guy is like a bad dude, right? And like, he's coming from the Belichick system where it's don't talk to the media, be guarded, everyone's kind of against you. It's Mike Tomlin where Mike Tomlin's always kind of surly, right? And he has kind of loosened up. I think it's this confidence in like, man, I'm doing my job. You know what I mean? And like, if he brings that somewhere else, it may work. He'd have to have an offensive coordinator to trust. He'd have to trust the quarterback, but and maybe he is the next guy. Maybe it is like this doesn't work out with O'Connell, but I just don't think that's great for Justin Jefferson. Having said that, because you'd have a coaching change, I think you get Jefferson to buy in. Here's a little more money. Like, again, the ownership is willing to spend. Here's a little more money. We're going to extend this out. Having said that, like, why test that? You know what I mean? Like, to me, this is about him, and this is where it gets back to, it is different if McCarthy is doing this on the Tennessee Titans, right? If it's the Titans, it's like McCarthy has to pan out or that whole regime gets flushed out, which, by the way, I guess would be what happens in Minnesota, but it gets flushed out because the quarterback didn't work and you couldn't build around him. This is actually a different scenario. This is, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use that weird phrase. Like, you could just throw out the baby. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could just go like, hey, I'm sorry, like McCarthy didn't work. By the way, I don't think he's gone. I think what happens is if you go get Mac Jones and Mac Jones wins in camp and Justin Jefferson goes, hey, throws a nice ball and like you can run the offense and you know what I mean? Like all this stuff, like McCarthy probably just sits and develops. Now you don't have the dynamic with the rookie quarterback. Also, I just think people are going to just see him as limited, right? You're going to like, if, for example, Mac Jones is like okay, but not great, I don't think people will trust that McCarthy is great and you can just swap him out, you know what I mean, in a couple of years. But I also think it's very possible, especially I do like this trend. It's not going to help the Vikings, but I love this trend that like teams are realizing Baker Mayfield was fine. Just go get him. You know what I mean? Geno Smith looks bad now, but Geno Smith was fine. Just go get him. Like even I know it sounds weird, but the Stafford trade, very risky. By the way, I'm shocked like Jared Goff worked out, but both sides identified something. Detroit was like, we have time to work with Jared Goff. He doesn't have to win a Super Bowl right now. And he is functional, right? So he can lead this Detroit team that is resurgent. And on the flip side, Stafford, this is a high standard, but Stafford I think he's 37, right? He is a tier one quarterback. Like he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I think that is what McVay identified. It's not just, hey, I'm getting like a Kirk Cousins type of good, maybe not great, or maybe great, not elite quarterback, right? To open that whole can of worms again. Like I'm getting a guy who I think is pretty great and making him elite. And like, I like that trend in the NFL. The problem is this could hurt the Vikings. If they let McCarthy go, someone else might go, I don't need him to win on a certain timeline. If you're the Titans and Cam Ward doesn't work out, I'd be shocked if JJ McCarthy was better than him. But like you could just kind of lose with him, right? And get him reps on the field and work with his mechanics and work with his decision making. And then when he's ready, you build the team around him. And I think the hard thing with the Vikings is like you have to do that now in a more complicated way. It'd be bringing back Jones. It'd be on this tight cap. Now, of course, you can always manipulate the cap, but as you said, it's basically like charging a credit card. And then you could technically, if Mac Jones, if you don't love him, you could move off him and move to McCarthy. It's just, you've created this unprecedented situation with a very weird team where like no one knows if that would actually work out.
Yeah. And the whole quarterback thing, I mean, we could go on and on about the quarterback stuff. The one thing I wanted to keep, mentioned before did leave here was that Dallas Turner. He's been playing a lot better as of late. 13 pressures and 4 sacks over his last 4 games, according to PFF. Would have had a 5th sack if it wasn't for the Aaron Rodgers rule in the Baltimore games. It's almost like the more he plays, the better he gets, which is kind of a weird concept for people to, think about. Sure. But I would like to see him kind of take off and become the pass rusher that we thought we were getting in the draft a couple of years ago.
Here's the weird thing about the Baltimore thing. ultimately the 3rd-and-1 decision is where that game hinged. If you actually look at the ESPN stats, it actually was Turner's sack that became a penalty, right? You think of how much that would influence the game, given like, where Lamar Jackson was relative to the field, all that stuff, right? Like if Turner, and this is something that I know, like people get sick of techniques and fundamentals. And to be fair, sometimes coaches just don't want to tell you anything. So they're like, oh, it's just about the techniques and fundamentals. And you're technically not wrong. But like, this is one of the things they do tell you, roll off the guy. You can't just lean your body weight into him, right? Because of the bar rule. But that goes from a sack to a penalty. That did actually influence the outcome of that game in a pretty significant way. Having said that, like we've seen how listen, if you just get decent quarterback play. If you Carson Wentz was bad, although I actually believe like if Carson Wentz just spent a little time in camp, he actually would he would have known the offense better. He maybe could have done a little more, but like if you get Carson Wentz level play, right? You think of Wentz was like bad, but he also won in these weird, he was driving. I know they lost, but he was driving against Pittsburgh in Dublin, which is, obviously overseas, weird environment, also a very Pittsburgh friendly environment, and then does pull off a pretty meaningful win. It doesn't feel like that now, but at the time, if you lose to Cleveland in that London game, like you've wasted your easy start, even, again, without McCarthy, but you know what I mean? Like the easy part of your season. I think he could have gone into Seattle, give you adequate quarterback play. And keep in mind, the defense gave up 19 points and the touchdown was late. And by the way, maybe they don't give up that touchdown if they aren't just grounded the earth, right? You know what I mean? If there's some more offensive plays and they have more rest and all that stuff, we would be talking about this epic Dallas Turner game where he had the strip sack. And then I think one of their guys fell on it. And then I think Redmond picked up the other one. Like Grenard was great. And I think Grenard is going to be one of these guys who were like, you'd have to watch the game to see what he's doing, because I think quarterbacks must know where he is, right? And they just release the ball, know it, like if he's in the backfield. The Eric Wilson is great. I think he's an undrafted guy and like second stint with the Vikings. And I think has had a pretty good season, pushed Ivan Pace out, right? And just seems like the savvy vet, maybe a little trouble against the run because he's smaller, but otherwise, like I think he's been really good. And then we'd be talking about Dallas Turner, who to me, and I'm not just saying this again because like it's a pick that kind of has to pan out, but like, yeah, he's just raw. Like it's just raw ability. It's another guy who comes out pretty young, who they trade up for because Kwesi doesn't want to regret not like making a move for him. Also, I don't know who you get like later in that first round anyway. So like, again, maybe you have that in front of you, but
Jared
like
Verse,
I think,
but yeah.
Yeah. Although I would say this with Jared Verse, like it makes sense to pick up a guy like that because of you're in the win now mode. Although, do they get Jared Verse if they don't trade up? They would have to trade up for him, right? Because they had to trade up for.
No, he was taken after.
Okay.
I
I get that it's a ready now player. I think the thing with Turner, and again, it would have to happen is, I think he's supposed to be a little more Van Ginkel than more just like the Grenard, like I thought they were just getting what's Daniil Hunter, right? Like I thought they were kind of getting his replacement because Grenard's an older player, right? So like I think I don't think he'll be full Van Ginkel. I think Van Ginkel will look back and be like, dude, that guy was so weird. You know what I mean? That's like a random guy who like Flores knew from Miami, a 5th round pick, who, if you look at it, played for like 4 different schools. I understand some people probably remember him from Wisconsin, but like, he also just doesn't say much. He's from this like little Iowa town. And I think just this kind of quiet guy and just uber smart. Right. And I don't know if like Turner will get to that level. I also don't know if he has kind of that, the like, kind of linebacker skills, right? That Van Ginkel, but I think he's supposed to have more that, right? It's more like read something off the guard, drop back. Someone's like, some guy will just take it and throw it right at you, like Van Ginkel, Rodgers in the Jets game. And so like, I just think I'm fascinated. That's the way I'm going to put it. I'm not guaranteeing he's going to be a star. Like I think Turner has raw ability. The other thing is I don't think much bothers him. So I don't think he's going to like be down after a game or down after a bad play or upset that he's not getting playtime. Like I think he gets it. I think he gets that. He watches Grenard and Grenard's good, right? That is a great contract no matter what. I think that's the best way to put it. And I think he looks at Van Ginkel and he goes, well, that dude looks pretty good too, right? And so I think like, to me, this is getting lost because that was a great defensive performance, because that was a good enough defensive performance in Seattle to win that game, to sneak out a win without much great offensive performance. We're talking probably 2 touchdowns in a normal situation. You probably win it. And like, this is another guy feast. You know what I mean? I didn't bring this up. I said Justin Jefferson's the guy to watch, but like, why can't he be disruptive against Washington? Why can't he have a big game on prime time? Why can't he smoke Jackson Dart? So like, I just think like, dude, to me, he's fascinating. I just think he has such raw talent. And I think, to be fair, with all their faults, Flores builds guys up because he was a scout to start.
All right, very quickly, because we're running out of time
Yeah.
here. Prediction time. Commanders, Vikings. I got Commanders 21, Vikings 7. I need to see this offense move the ball before I can bend them for anything more than 7 points right now. So what do you say about this game? Can the Vikings pull one out, and can McCarthy uh, build some momentum here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I went from someone who did a good job predicting in 2022, weirdly, to like, I was telling people with the Packers, I'm like, well, like the Vikings are weird. They do weird stuff. Even in Seattle, I predicted Seattle would win, but I was like, are they going to beat Seattle and just ruin everything? Like draft picks, all this stuff, right? Give people hope when they shouldn't have hope. Obviously, that's not what happened, but I think it's going to be like a 16-13. I think it's going to be like McCarthy comeback. That's kind of how I see this playing out. Like, I think it's gonna be a grind throughout it. I should look at the over under before making a prediction, but I assume like this is a game people are eyeing the under, and it's 2.5 Vikings. I guess it makes a difference if it's Daniels. I will say this: I know Daniels is an experienced like young player. I think that's a dude the defense can mess with. I really do. And so I just think it's gonna be a grindy field goal fest. Again, all hail Will Reichert for knock on wood for just being a dude. Just do your job. And actually, he's gone beyond his job. He that kick in. I mean, he's had more than this, but the one in Chicago and really like Green Bay is a tough one. Like, dude, he just does it no problem. You know what I mean? Like, even when you ask about him, he's like, yeah, it's just kind of like lining up. And I was looking at the win, and I was like, never once you were like, dude, this is kind of far. But I think it's to be a grindy like 16-13 win. I actually do think they pick up the New York game too. But it just ultimately it's like I think it's be unsatisfactory because if it's 16-3, like it doesn't mean Justin Jefferson went off or JJ McCarthy looked like a franchise quarterback, right?
So, with all that in the rearview mirror, we'll be very excited for this Tankathon matchup on Sunday. But until then, you can read about all of our stuff. Tom, of course, is at zonecoverage.com. I write there too. I do Vikings and Twin stuff as well as writing about the hottest team in hockey, the Minnesota Wild at Hockey Wilderness. What else is going on at Zone Coverage, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, daily content, you kind of touched on this, but on Vikings, Twins, Wolves, and Wild. I will say this, even with hockey, I'm actually weirdly, I'm trying to get our guys to write more. The problem with the hockey team, not that we have to get into this, is that it is a lot of goaltending defense, right? So it is a little hard to like, I know you fight everyone with Matt Boley, but like Matt Boley's playing pretty well. Like Kaprizov's playing. After that, you're in the Marcus Johansson business, basically. But
Yeah.
Obviously daily content on that if you're a hockey fan. Otherwise, we will still have daily content on the Vikings. And I think what we're trying to balance now is we're already getting to maybe not full-fledged draft stuff, but like some guys are looking at like how do you fix this offensive line, this and that. But also we are tracking all this stuff. I mean, listen, I wrote about Brosmer that had to be the funniest game for him. It had to be just over before he. You know what I mean? Like you think of the fast processing and the 4 interceptions and this crazy defense and the loud crowd. Like if that's his only start, which I think this is it for Brosmer, at least this year, right? Because they're investing in McCarthy. Like I'm sure he just like woke up one day, like the next day, and was like, "What happened?" And so, we're looking at every aspect from Justin Jefferson's angle. I wrote about Turner. Like, we'll cover the good defensive stuff. We'll look at things like minutia that worked well. So we still have daily content on the Vikings, and obviously, I mean, it's going to be earlier than normal, right? But like, we're going to dive right into draft stuff. It's going to be guys who are watching film, and we even bring some guys in who don't write throughout the year, who just go like, hey, these are guys the Vikings can get, even in the 4th round, even in the 6th round. Like, these are value. Listen, if you're Kwesi, take a look. But I think it's, we're still going to have daily content on the Vikings. I'm still writing about them, and we're all crossing our fingers that like the Timberwolves and the Wild carry some weight here, with the Vikings obviously being irrelevant in December.
And of course, FanSided, I'm heavily involved over there. We got the RBN network. If you want to hate watch the rest of the division because the Vikings are out of it, we got Packers stuff at Dairyland Express. I'm very involved over there. The Windy City for the Bears. They got a big matchup this weekend. And then Detroit Jock City for the Lions. And of course, you got the VikingAge.com to keep up with Viking stuff. A lot of forward-looking content there. Adam Carlson wrote about KOC's idea to simplify the offense this morning. Ryan O'Leary wrote about some veteran quarterbacks the Vikings could go after next offseason, and some starters who are playing their way out of Minnesota, and some other stuff like Adam Thielen in Pittsburgh. Ryan Silverfield, who I didn't even know was on the Viking staff at one point. He just got hired at Arkansas, so you can keep up with everything Vikings over at thevikingage.com, and you can listen to us here because this is the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast of thevikingage.com. I am Chris Schad at The Real Chris Schad. He is Tom Schreier at T Schreier3. We do this every Tuesday and Friday morning right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel, and we're in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. So however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. We can spread the word to the masses. For Tom Schreier, I am Chris Schad. 4 letters, 1 word, Skull.